Hi, I'm Rob Carolina. This is one part of a multi-part introduction to the law and regulation knowledge area of CyBOK. The law and regulation knowledge area is one of 19 knowledge areas in the entire project. The webinar that introduces this knowledge area is pretty long, and so I decided to break it up into 15 constituent parts. You are now about to listen to one of those parts. If you haven't already done so, I would recommend that you go back and listen to the introduction. It's also labeled Part 0. That'll help you understand what's about to happen. Alternatively, you can listen to the entire webinar as a single file. So without further ado, let's listen to this part. Finally, let's have a word about legal risk management. I'm going to go back to this formula that I presented in Section 1. Remember that the formula was designed to try to tease out the different things that you need to think about in terms of assessing legal risk. Well, that's when you're assessing legal risk of something that's already happened. Yes, we want to follow the rules and we should follow legal rules. At the same time, we make a risk decision. Will a person be willing to enforce rules? What do we have at stake if a rule is enforced? Are there affirmative defenses that means that we have particular rights to do something? So we start with that, and then we start looking at these other forward-looking points. In trying to risk manage law, first of all, I suggest look for subject matter areas of greatest risk. No matter what type of organization you're working in, there will be some areas of law, some areas of regulation that frankly matter more than others. Always think about impact on human life. If you're involved in anything that might put human life at risk, you must pay much closer attention to your obligations. Due diligence. How do you even find out which laws you're supposed to comply with? Well, try to figure out which areas of law are most important and which states are most likely to enforce those laws, and that's where you conduct due diligence to try to find out what the law says, how the law works, and align your operations with that. Think about the practical limits of enforcement jurisdiction. Also, consider costs of breaching non-criminal obligations. When we talked about contracts, I mentioned that one of the limitations with contracts is that people make a calculation, a business calculation. How much will it cost me to simply ignore this thing that I've agreed to do? And if the answer is very, very small, they might walk away from that obligation. As an individual practitioner, think long and hard about risk to your personal liberty, your safety, and your reputation. Anyone who works in the field of cybersecurity hits a point at some point in their career where they're asked to do something that's illegal. It might be a small crime or it might be a big crime. It might be in the state where you live or it might be in the state that you're visiting. Remember, your life, your liberty, your reputation is on the line. Think about likelihood of enforcement, particularly for non-criminal cases. Think about challenges of collecting and preserving and presenting evidence in terms of, particularly if you're working with a trading program or something like that. Think about how will I justify the decisions that I've made today about our cybersecurity activities if we are later sued for negligence, if we are later sued for a breach of contract. Think about vicarious liability. What kind of liability will our employees bring to our organization? How do we influence the behavior of our employees in order to reduce the organization's liability? Think about localizing risky activity in separate companies, separate legal persons. Now, this is the type of activity that you'll probably have to engage a corporate lawyer to figure out how to do. A lot of cyber risk has been reduced by simply sticking it in a completely separately capitalized subsidiary or a sister company and taking it off the books of the company that must be preserved. Think about risks that are external to the legal enforcement system entirely. Reputation, loss of business, bad public relations. Nobody wants to be this week's headline on CNN because of a cyber disaster of some type. And then most difficult of all, try to think about changes in law or policy that are likely to come up sometime in the future. Keep an eye on the direction, on the trend of laws that are being adopted and laws that are being enforced. I hope you've enjoyed this quick walk through the contents of CyBOK Law and Regulation knowledge area. Please feel free to communicate with me if you want to correspond on subjects arising.